Welcome to the program tonight. I know some of you were sitting in on our annual meeting, but to those of you who weren't welcomed already, welcome. It's wonderful to be doing this program back at the school again. We're here for the first time since the pandemic, so please excuse some of our rough edges around here. We're a little out of practice. So my name is Susan Pearson. I'm co-president along with Fred Jones of the Land Trust. I'd like to recognize our other officer who's present here tonight, Jane Jones. Yay! Our other board members in attendance here, Sue Murray, Alana Bordewick. I do want to regretfully announce that two members have cycled off our board recently, John Harity and Sandy Lasella. And tonight we had our last meeting with Alana Bordewick, and this is a very hard transition for all of us, but probably especially for Fred, because the two of you have been with the Land Trust since before day one. So I just want to thank you, Alana. We will be recognizing you more formally as a board, but we will miss you. Your guidance has just, you're one of the hearts of Hartland Land Trust. As you might be able to tell, we could use some reinforcements, so please speak to any of us. Call, I think we're all listed in the phone book. Call us up, email us, Hartland Land Trust, but please, we will welcome any kind of volunteers, from a trail worker to somebody helping with programs like this, to definitely to good board members. So feel free to speak up. We have a sales table. Please visit that after the program. There will be some fish cookies at the door. Please grab a couple on your way out. They're not made of fish. They aren't. Sorry, I should have brought a sample. They are actually cookies that are shaped like fish. Okay, and also please join us on November 14th for our next program, which will be on Native American winter with the recently retired anthropologist from the Native American Institute, I may have the name wrong, in Washington, Connecticut. So that's going to be a great program too, and I hope everybody will show up. And on that note, I will begin our meeting tonight by reading out our land acknowledgement, which is a recent tradition of ours at Hartland Land Trust. We are gathered on the traditional lands of the Tungus, Agawam, and Mohican tribes, and all other tribal communities who may have once called Hartland their home. Heartland Land Trust asks you to join us in acknowledging these tribal communities that respected and cherish the forests, streams, and wildlife that make up this beautiful land we know as Hartland. And that being said, we're ready to move on to our current program. I'm very pleased to be bringing this program here tonight, recognizing the work of our two committees that steward and oversee the health of the Farmington River, both parts of it that Hartland watershed straddles. We have two committees. Liz, I think, will go into a little more detail on how this is all set up. But I'd like to recognize Sue Murray as our Hartland representative to the Lower Farmington and Salmon Brook Wild and Scenic Committee. Did I get that all right, Sue? And your alternate is Hank Crossing, both here tonight. And the second committee is the Farmington River Coordinating Committee that oversees the Upper Farmington Wild and Scenic Group. So Dan Bowler is our Hartland representative, has been maybe since the beginning? No, not
just
quite.
for the last few years.
Oh, okay. And I know he's been chair for the last few years, but I thought he's been on the group for longer. No? Okay.
Well, maybe
Fred Jones.
Fred.
Well, Fred was part of the original group.
Not the original FRCC.
And
Neil Gilpin.
Neil Gilpin.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks. Should have checked with you guys first. Anyway, so I want to recognize their participation in this program. But our speaker tonight is Liz Lacy, who since 2001 has worked as a community planner and river manager for the National Park Service Wild and Scenic Rivers program. She provides her technical expertise for partnership wild and scenic rivers, primarily in Massachusetts and Connecticut, the Upper Farmington and Lower Farmington, and the 8 Mile, which must be in Massachusetts.
The
No?
8 Mile is down in Lyme, East Hampton, that area.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
You cover a wide territory. She works with partners on river studies, river management plans, river stewardship plans, public education and outreach programs, and technical reviews of water resource projects, and is a trainer on wild and scenic river topics. Liz is a National Park Service representative on the Interagency Wild and Scenic Rivers Coordinating Council, was a member of the NPS Wild and Scenic River Steering Committee, as well as a board member of the River Management Society. She has an undergraduate degree in geography and master's degree in regional planning, with postgraduate training in river restoration, visitor use management, and other river-related topics. So, thank you, Liz. Welcome.
Thank you, and it's great to be here, and it's really fun to be in the town where both of these sections are, and both committees have reps, and you know, it's a wonderful treat. And it's also a treat to be in the town where a little story way back when on FRCC, I don't know if many of you know Pat Keener, who was from New Hartford. She was great at reeling people in to be on the committee, and she reeled Fred Jones in on FRCC a long while ago. And he swore when he introduced himself that he knew nothing, he didn't know how to do anything. No, I don't know what I'm going to be able to do to help you, but yeah, I'll be here. And he ended up, you know, being one of the founders of Hartland Land Trust. So I think, you know, anyway, the way I'd like to do this is it's a small group, so it's not a really formal presentation. It can be, but it's not necessarily. So I will go through slides and my presentation, but if something comes along that you have a question about, don't hesitate to ask, and we can also address questions at the end. Anyway, Susan mentioned that I work with the Partnership Wild and Scenic Rivers program, and that's a subset of the larger Wild and Scenic Rivers system across the United States. And the Wild and Scenic Rivers system got started to counteract some of the activities that were going on in the 60s of a lot of large dam building and a lot of water being shifted around, and some very, very bright people in Congress got the idea that they needed to have some kind of system in place to counteract all of that and to save some of these beautiful special rivers in their free-flowing state for future generations, and they wouldn't all get dammed up. So that's the original heart of the National Wild and Scenic Rivers Act, and that's where this all comes from. And I highlighted the yellow pieces of this that really are the sort of foundation for all of us and all of our work on the Wild and Scenic Rivers. And this is the Upper Farmington River section of the Wild and Scenic. And Hartland has a beginning section up there. In case none of you knew exactly what one was. And this is the larger designation of the lower Farmington and Salmon Brook, and you have the Salmon Brook right edge.
Where the headwaters of the West Branch of the Center.
Yeah. Yeah, and actually, that doesn't even look like it's. It is, okay. Anyway, so those are the areas, in case you didn't know. The Wildly Scenic Rivers Act, the partnership rivers are a subset that are in the east, and they have a different setup than some of the larger ones out west, which you can imagine are in large national parks or large federally owned areas. The partnership rivers are in places, as you know, that have different ownership. They have private land, state land, community land, and depending on where you have one of these rivers, you have to have some kind of management scheme. And if you have a federal system, you have all the staff that will manage the river. If you're in an Eastern Partnership river, you don't have staff, you don't have land. And so you need to somehow put together all the pieces to make that work. And that's what the Partnership Rivers piece is all about. But each of the rivers has its own classification. Doesn't mean it's treated any differently in the system. It just means that the circumstances of that river are slightly different. Wild rivers, which there aren't very many of in the east. There's a little tiny segment on the Westfield in Massachusetts, and there's up in Maine, I think there is a wild river, but there aren't any of those around, and that's because they're really remote. Scenic river areas, they have the sort of somewhat remote, but also accessible kind of a situation. And then recreational rivers are rivers like we have where you can really get to them by roads easily. They're within more developed areas.
Could you define impoundment? Each of those says free of impoundment. Could you define impoundment, and what would be an example of an impoundment?
An impoundment is the area behind the dam. And it's different folks who own dams will maybe define their impoundment a little bit differently, but it's the section of river that doesn't act like a river. It acts more like a lake.
Okay.
Good
Does that
example of
make
that
sense?
is in Collinsville.
What's that?
A good example of that is in Collinsville,
Yes.
where they do the canoeing and kayaking.
Right. So if it still has, so like on the Nashua River in Massachusetts that got designated wildly scenic, there are actually various impoundments along that designation, but the reason they were able to is because they still had some flow and still had some riparian kind of characteristics. So, and so the upper Farmington is recreational. You know, you can just drive along each side, throw your boat in anywhere. But it's got free-flowing condition, and people are confused by that too. Well, if there's dams up there, how could it be free-flowing? It's just that the character of the river, where it's designated below the dams, is a free-flowing nature. And it has high water quality, many recreational opportunities. Of course, the fish habitat and the fish stocking, and it draws all kinds of people from all over the place for fishing. Bald eagles are back, which is great. And then a lot of historical and archaeological sites, the lighthouse site, and all kinds of things that are out there along the river. The lower Farmington, same thing, free-flowing, high water quality, lots of recreation. They have biological diversity as one of their outstandingly remarkable values, which are the values that some groups call outstanding resource values, but the Act calls them outstandingly remarkable values. So you'll hear me say those things interchangeably. And we call them, ORVs, which leads everybody to think of something else, but outstanding resource values. So these are the wonderful characteristics of the lower rivers. So we talk about the benefits of designation, and this often goes on when we're working with a group who's thinking of becoming designated. They want to say, all right, so what does this do for us? What does this designation actually do for us? And these are some of the things. You know, it's a lot of people feel very proud of the fact that the river in their community meets these standards that are nationwide standards that get nationwide sort of attention. And that's a very nice thing to have and be proud of. Also, particularly on partnership rivers, there's local control. Particularly on the upper Farmington, not so much on the lower Farmington. Special riparian zoning was put in place for the upper Farmington's designation. But you have to prove that you have local and state mechanisms in place that will help protect the river. And those are not federally like the feds don't come and say you have to put this law in place. You know, the locals really choose which laws they want to have in place. So the other really strong thing about the designation is the fact that any project that comes along on the river banks, on the bed of the river, around the area that's going to affect the river, any federally permitted or federally funded project will have a review by the Park Service, and usually with the committees to make sure that everybody has local input into the decision. But we look to make sure that the projects are going to really be compatible with the values for which the river is designated, and they're not going to, if anything, they enhance the situation. They're not going to damage the resources for which the river is protected.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Sure.
Like, areas where you have like private homes and things like that along the river, so what are the efforts to keep like septic systems upgraded, prevent pesticide sprays on lawns? The only reason I mention that is I'm from Ohio, which was poorly moderated, and too much local control over how that happened.
Right. Right. Well, that is true, and that's where everybody here comes into play, is that it is locally controlled. Local health departments manage the septic systems. Any kind of local ordinances that control that river's edge or around the river and those water resources, those have to be monitored and enforced by the local folks. And not always.
Yeah.
And that's why it's helpful, like this kind of a session where people learn more about the river and what's, in place to protect it. That means that people will be able to say, hey, I see down the road the septic system seems to be problematic. We should tell somebody about it so that, so there has to be some citizen involvement and some vigilance, and caring as a community about the river, as there would be ordinarily, I think, but even more so if it's a well-designed river.
Because it is the river, and that's what they're using as their septic system.
Yeah.
So I don't want to belabor it, but I think it's a huge problem in areas that are privately owned.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that because there are codes a lot in most of the areas that we're talking about, there are building codes, there are septic codes, and that sort of thing. So there are people kind of keeping track of that sort of thing. So the other thing is that they have found in numerous wild and scenic river sections all over the country that it's a boost to local economies, that people are drawn to the river, they end up coming and using the resources around and paying for their various recreation types of things. So there needs to be an update of the Farmington River Economic Study, because that was done way back in the beginning. It would be interesting to see now, because it's certainly a lot more crowded than it was in the 90s. So the other thing is with the partnership rivers, there are about 15 or 16 of them along the East Coast. And there's a whole group that gets together and they share resources about different things that different rivers do. They have a lot of ideas about how to work with partners out in the community and how to work with other agencies and that sort of thing to use some of the funding that they get every year. Every year there is federal funding from Congress. We hope each year Congress votes to give funding to these rivers, and that's put towards projects that can help protect the river. And those pockets of money can actually go out there and be matched with other pockets of money and have larger, bigger projects done that help protect the river. So Susan sort of talked about this. On each section of river that's designated, there's a management committee, and that's the coordinating committee for the upper river and the wild and scenic committee on the lower and Sandy Brook. It's actually embedded in the bill that's made with the act that turns the river into a wild and scenic river. Most of the time, those groups are made up of representatives of the towns along the river and other agencies that work there, other stakeholders in the area that will be able to plan and create a management plan in that whole process of becoming a designated river. So hopefully all of the groups that are involved get together on a regular basis and they pull together any issues that are coming up, potential projects, communicating about the river, educating people about the river, and then working with other agencies to review projects that come up along the river. These are the various folks who are on each of the committees. So what we call teeth of our designation is this project review, and that's the federal review of the federally funded or permitted projects. And that really is super important because some of those larger projects can really change the character, the health, and everything around the communities, the river. So that committee's review and the Park Service's review together really make a big, big difference in that. So we have a few projects that I've done over the years. Some of these are a little older. There's a bunch of newer ones. But I don't know if many of you have driven down West River Road in Barkhamsted, and there's places along the river where there have been restorations. A lot of invasive plant management has gone on over the years.
Is that an invasive, the Steve Burns? Is that an
Yes, I think that's lesser selling, big. I'm just trying to figure out why this is. Here we go. This is a bioswale that was created up in. We've actually in the upper river worked a bit up in the upper reaches to prevent some of the pollutants that are coming down into the Farmington from other places. And so there's been some hands-on projects, some demonstration projects done around Winstead to help capture some of the pollutants.
Excuse me, Liz, did you use goats for invasive management in any of the projects there?
sorry, I can't hear you.
I'm sorry, did you use goats for invasive management?
Oh,
Goats.
yes.
Sorry, I saw the picture.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I kind of skipped right over that. Actually, for a while, that was part of the invasive plant management scheme. As some goats down the road got corralled and would be brought around to different areas to clear them. And it's very useful, and it's great for the goats, right? And you've heard of that before.
It's a win-win.
It sure is. Another project which Dan Bowler's been really involved in is the Farmington River Quilt project, which I imagine some of you have seen. That was remarkable. That's probably been one of the biggest PR pieces for Wild and Scenic that we've ever had. These presentations are nice, but that quilt was at the State House, and just lots and lots of people see it and are just completely flabbergasted by the 50-foot long, 2-foot by 2-foot segments, right? With all the different scenes on the upper Farmington, done by local quilters. Pieced all together, and you can see all of the flow of the river, and it's very special.
I was in Hartland Town Hall for quite some time.
Yeah.
A few years ago, they had it at a quilt show in Winchester Center
Yeah.
at the church up there.
Yep. So a lot of creative things can get done using the funding and using all of the local resources and the people who are involved in this. It's terrific what people, if you sit on a committee, you may not be trained to do river protection work. Maybe you are an artist or a carpenter, an architect, or whatever. You bring those skills to that table, and all kinds of great ideas come about working on those committees. Another great idea, we have with us here Stefan Bistricki, the river steward on the Upper Farmington, who has been helping create this wonderful program to be sort of the eyes and ears and also the friendly face of the river, and going out with a team of river stewards in the summer to do a lot of different kinds of programs and discussions with people, data collection, picking up trash, just keeping track of things in general. And is there anything to add to that, Stefan?
Yeah, a lot of outreach from shores and on the water. This year we did we started to do the kiosks in the state forest.
Right. Yeah. They get involved in everything from invasive plant management to construction of facilities and
a lot of the events in towns with show booths. Facebook, yes, and I'm glad somebody's seen those, yeah.
And helping at town events and working students around the areas.
Yeah.
Most of the events throughout the year.
yeah. It's a way that the towns have been able to have a little bit more connection to the river too, I think, because they have these stewards. I know that they know that they can maybe have the stewards come for a project or for a particular event or anything like that, and have a little bit of an extra set of hands to help out during those things. And that was one of our teams a few years ago.
Yeah, that was early, that's
Yeah.
second or maybe third year of the program, 2016, 17 maybe.
And we've got a variety of hired part-time stewards and some volunteers usually. There are other more scientific things that go on to kind of monitor the health of the river over time, particularly things like the water quality monitoring program, which Farmington River Watershed Association is the mastermind behind, and they really just make sure and keep track of every section of river and how it's doing, and then they give us the results, and we can see if there are any problems, and then we can focus some funding or a project in those areas, like that Still River example. whole lot of outreach, as Sue can attest to.
Yes. And the Lower Wildland Scenic has a display being set up in West Hartland at the community library there. So it's going to be there October 1st for the whole month. So if you'd like to learn more, go up to the library in West Hartland and take a look at it.
Yeah, so it's changing over time too, because of course, fewer people are going to workshops like this, perhaps, or less likely to pick up a brochure. There may be more on social media. So there's a lot of adapting to, and I know Donna has been instrumental in doing a lot of the social media stuff for the river stewards on the Upper Farmington, and that's great.
People always tell me great picture, but I really have to get the credit to her. She's doing most of it.
Thank you, Donna. Yeah, so I mean, there are various things over the years. We have this program going on, I think, in both Upper and Lower. Green Snow Pro?
Yes, Green Snow Pro.
Green Snow Pro, which is teaching local DPWs and others involved in keeping the roads safe in the winter about salt or other kinds of applications to keep the road safe so that we're not affecting the river and water quality nearly as badly. So that's, all kinds of things that we can get involved in locally to help the towns and others do a job that might not be any more complicated or difficult, it's just understanding a different practice. And then there's a grant program in each camp, and that's where a lot of projects go on, and they're really interesting. It can be schools, it can be local other organizations, all kinds of different grant kinds of programs that have gone on over the years. It's a very simple application process too. Put a plug in for it in case anybody's interested. In both cases, it's like a page, and simple information that you need to provide. And then on the Upper River, I'm not sure we can do it right now, but there have been scholarships in the past, and I think for many years we had a donation of funds from outside, and we used those to provide scholarships. And we have helped land trusts over the years, and this was a really wonderful, I'm just so pleased about the Hartland Land Trust being as strong and vibrant as you are now in such a short time too, really. And it makes, I think, a lot of the folks on the committee very proud to know that they were able to provide some seed money that was just kind of taken off. And that's another form of leveraging those funds. And that's my overview. And so, hey.
Yeah, I just wondered if you could speak a bit about the importance of tributaries in this thing, because this is a wild and scenic river. When you think about actually most of the towns in designations are along the river. We've got a little bit of riverfront, but most of the land in Hartland is really upland. And it feeds, it's around tributaries that feed into the farm thing. Could you explain a little bit more how these programs can impact efforts that are going on in tributaries to keep them, the water quality clean, all the other values that you want to keep up?
Yeah, so with the Wild and Scenic River, there's really no boundaries on the land. There's really no discrete definition. There's not going to be a sign saying here's where it starts. I mean, the upper and lower designated points are pretty specific, but from side to side out onto the land, you don't really have boundaries. The rough rule of thumb is we go out a quarter mile around the river with projects that could potentially be an impact to the river. On tributaries, that's also true. And we would, if there is, say, a culvert replacement or a bank restoration or some kind of project that's going to take place, we will review that project if it's within a quarter mile. But there are projects significant enough on any tributary. We like to know about it, we like to sort of keep an eye on it, and if it's going to have an impact on the free flow of the river or the habitat values of the river, a major tree clearing in the upper reaches of the river that's going to warm up the water, especially, for the trout and that sort of thing. You're going to want to know about that and perhaps work with the landowner to prevent the very edge of the river from getting clear cut so that, you keep that stream cool. So that's...
It's mostly carrots, less stick than carrot.
Right. And that's why that sort of federal review of projects within the designated portion comes in handy, because you can actually put conditions on a project and say, please don't clear this size of tree from the river's edge, or, something like that. Encourage the use of best management practices in a project. Encourage less riprap and more wood and vegetation and natural native plants and that sort of thing. We kind of discourage riprap if we can, and you can really actually stabilize a bank pretty well using what nature has up or downstream, rocks and soil and vegetation. So that's really, it's a limit. It should be something that I think that the best management practices and the things that we look for during a federal review, it would be great if they trickled out into areas that we don't necessarily, have a say in for sure. But if towns could look at all of their rivers and all of the section of river, it's like, okay, we aren't going to use hay bales because they usually carry invasives. We're going to use compostable wattles, and no plastic, because that ends up either getting out somewhere else and causing a problem with the critters. So yeah, best management practices are a really good thing. If we could see those spread out, it'd be great.
If we were to notice something either along the river or one of the tributaries that might be questionable, who do we contact? How do we go about notifying someone?
That's a really good question.
Who do we notify? How do we do that?
So because it's a partnership and because there's local control with the regulations along the river, you're going to go to your local, to your town hall, and you're going to talk to the boards that oversee wetlands or planning and zoning. And that's your first. Also, you can talk to your town reps and say, hey, Sue, this looks really fishy, I'm not sure this should be going on up there. And then if it does come to Sue and she brings it to the committee can reach out to the people who would be able to take a closer look and perhaps, correct the situation if something bad is going on. But
And then if I could,
yeah.
Could you go back 2 slides? There was something in Colebrook. You mentioned that there was, what is Richard Smith's site? And where is it?
That is an old factory site, I believe. Fred knows
Yeah,
this.
that was a site that, where they actually produced iron for the Revolutionary War. And Walt Landgraf, have you ever heard that name? Walter Landgraf? Okay, he was pretty famous in Barkhamsted. You actually stumbled across it doing research at the Harvard Library. Anyway, do you know where the old Forge Road is in Colebrook?
Yes. Because
You
people
know what
get
that-
get mixed up with our road.
You know where that bridge is, that nice bridge
Yes.
that they put in?
Yeah, they redid that
Okay, when
bridge.
you cross that bridge, you
Yeah.
go up to Creamery, I think it's Creamery Road or something?
Yes.
Okay, it's right there,
Oh.
across the street from that house
Okay.
on the corner, Creamery Road. That's that's where it's located.
Okay,
You can't really see anything,
yeah,
you know.
It's
just a-
archaeological,
yeah,
so it's old.
It's a site,
Yeah.
but, you know, they really did some digging and found all kinds of interesting artifacts.
Nice meeting you.
Other questions?
Just wanted just to go over one thing again. The Wild and Scenic Management Committees may not have the regulatory authority to address, questionable activities along the river, but the partnership part of it means that we can talk with the town agencies and authorities, and maybe with a carrot rather than a stick, we can offer, possible solutions and funding for possible solutions to help address problems. And that's really how the committees do their work,
Right.
encouraging rather than coming down on people.
That's right. It's important that everyone understand what Wild and Scenic can and can't do. Because a lot of people think, oh, once Wild and Scenic is here, it's going to protect us from everything. And that may be true if it's in a national park or, a big federally owned area. But along here, with everybody around and all kinds of shenanigans going on, we do have to work together. And Wild and Scenic can only do so much, and it's really important for the towns to hold up their end of the bargain, to really take the time to review the projects that come before them and pull us in if need be. And it's just really super important for it to be a community together, taking care of the river. Because Wild and Scenic just doesn't do everything. It does a lot. It gives the people a lot of pride, but it needs that partnership part. Any other questions? Anything else you're curious about?
How has the Wild and Scenic Committees helped the land trust specifically in their acquisitions and whatever?
Oh, yeah. Well, there's startup funds, which you all experience, but also land trusts come to us for contributions towards protecting land, which we've had Hartland Land Trust take advantage of a lot. And the committees both will contribute to different aspects of protecting land. We can't own land, but we can help you and others protect land. So that's really by surveying, or even sometimes if it's a super special project, contributing to the purchase price. We did that in New Hartford. We helped with a challenge grant, contributing a chunk of money, and then other people were encouraged to donate money based on that. So yeah, it's a, you need that one last little chunk, that $2,500 or whatever it is to do your project. FRCC or the Lower Farmington and Salmon Brook, and often definitely has to be related to the river in some way, but I think anytime you protect land in the watershed, you're probably helping the river, right? So, but the closer you are to the river, tributary, some kind of headwater, that sort of thing, I think the more likely it is that the water, the committee would fund the project.
Well, the committees have also funded the town significantly throughout the years. They've funded a natural resource inventory for the planning of conservation and development and the Conservation Commission, and that was funded by the Wild and Scenic Group. And an update to that report is being done currently, which is also being funded by Wild and Scenic. So the town and the Wild and Scenic really get together and really work well together. and, along with the land trust. And it's been very, very positive throughout the years. So I think the upper designation was done in 1994.
Yes.
And the lower designation was more recently done in 2019. So the town of Hartland is a dual wild and scenic town, and there's funding available from both the upper and the lower designation. So the granting process, as Liz said, is very simple and can do a lot for Hartland, depending on which side of town you live on. But feel free to reach out to Hank or myself, and if you have ideas of things that you might want funded, then we'd be more than happy to help out. I also wanted to point out that the upper designation has put in 2 kiosks in West Hartland in the state forest. And there's one that's going in through the lower wild and scenic on the east side, either at Bird Pond or Bird Field. Those are the most likely locations now, which would be informative of what wild and scenic is, where the brooks are, and so on and so forth. So we really do have a good rapport with the town, and we work hard at it. And the town is very supportive of us.
The other thing is there are pretty beautiful websites for each group. FarmingtonRiver.org is for the Farmington River Coordinating Committee on the Upper River, and then Lower Farmington and Salmon Brook.
No.
So it's just Lower Farmington. It's just lowerfarmingtonriver.org. That's right. We haven't added the Salmon Brook yet. Okay, so Lower Farmington River.
Yeah, we had it up there before.
Is it? Okay. Anyway, but if you go to nps.gov/WSR, that's a cool place where you're going to see all the websites for all the partnership rivers, and you can poke around in there and see how they do things similarly or differently, and that is really interesting.
Yeah, the websites are really very informative.
Yeah.
Pretty, too.
And then rivers.gov, I encourage you to take a peek at too, because that's an interagency site. That's all the different agencies that host or administer wild and scenic rivers. And it's just an encyclopedia about rivers and wild and scenic, and which rivers are wild and scenic, how many miles, all of their, all of the information. You see, I get excited. I love it.
Yeah.
But I encourage you to take a look and call me anytime. And I have a partner in crime nowadays on our rivers around here, Andrew Petitmange, who is much more active on the upper river, and I've sort of stepped away and I'm much more active on the lower river, but he helps there too. But we're both happy and open to answer more questions if something pops into your head at some point. Or if you have a project that you're concerned about, you can always contact us too, and we can try to navigate, so to speak.
Thank you so much, Liz, for a great presentation. We want to give you something to remember Hartland.
Oh, thank you.
And carry your laptop there. And your cords.